your source for everything paranormal. Para-X. The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para-X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
May the circle be open but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. May the circle be open but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron on the Para-X Radio Network. And now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody once again, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para-X Radio Network. I've got a really interesting show for you tonight. My guest is Shaman and author Willie Windwalker Gibson. Now, Willie's a sensitive who sees and hears spirits and a spiritual advisor. He reads totem animal cards, performs cleansing and clearings, investigates the paranormal, and is the author of 2 books, The Shaman Windwalker and Soul Warriors. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about, we're not going to be talking about animal guides and totems, but we are going to be talking about stories. Willie has a background in paranormal, and he's had some very interesting paranormal experiences, starting at childhood, actually, and a few ET things, too. So we're really going to get into that, and I love it when we have stories. It's like, okay, we're going to have story time, but it's some really interesting things. And before we get into the stories, we're going to talk a tiny bit about shamanism because I have a question on that. But I just, I thought it'd be interesting to listen to some of his stories, and he's kind of getting them all together and going to put a book together of them, which is going to be really great. So I asked him to pop in and share some of the stories. So, Willie, thank you for coming in today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
All right. Well, like I said, before we get into the stories, I'm wondering if your becoming a shaman had anything to do with your early experiences with spirits.
Well, actually, Marla, it started when I was around 10 years old. I started hearing things, hearing voices and things like that. And, I just thought it was my imagination. And, I was the type of kid that I was Native American, I was heavy set, and I had a problem with my leg. And so I was limping around and things like that. And I was pretty much a loner because kids, didn't want to play with me, and like I said, I was kind of heavy set, and way back then, although kids are kind of cruel, and, they didn't want to really be around me, so I spent a lot of time by myself sitting under a tree or something like that. So I was by myself one time in my backyard, and it was about 4:00 in the afternoon. I was playing by myself, and I happened to look up in the sky, and I seen this bright star. Now, this was like 4:00 in the afternoon, and I kept watching it until it got bigger and bigger, until it got over my head, and it was a round metallic thing with lights under it, and there was a flash of light, and the next thing I know, it's dark. It's like 8:00 at night. And I'm still standing in my backyard, and I go in the house, and my dad's all mad, and he wanted to know where I was at because I was missing for like 4 hours. And I didn't know what to tell him. So he went on ahead and sent me to my room, and I was laying there on my bed, and a voice started talking to me like in my head saying, everything's going to be okay, Willie. So I fell asleep, and the next day when I got up, I started seeing colors, and my hearing was a little bit more clearer, and I actually started seeing things then. I started seeing people that wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
And, it kind of bothered me a little bit, so I went and told my dad what was going on. I didn't tell him about this thing I saw. I just said, I've been hearing and seeing things. Well, my dad, being Native American, knew then that something was going on with me.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I started, my gifts started getting enhanced. I think that that encounter sharpened my abilities. And my dad told me, do not tell people that you can see things. Do not tell people you can see spirits and things like that. He said, you see something like that, you come to me. So every time I'd have an encounter, I'd go to him. So it was at that time he started training me. So I didn't know he was training me. I just thought, he was just taking me places. Well, he would take me places like funeral homes. And have me go in and get around bodies and things like that and go up to the coffin, and he would tell me, son, the spirit's not there anymore. This is just a vessel, and, the spirit is gone. Well, sometimes I would look over in the corner, see the person standing there. And I would tell him, Dad, there's it's standing over there. He said, I know it's standing over there. He said, until they're in sanctified grounds, they'll be around for a little while, and sometimes they stay around for some certain reasons. And it was that time he started, training me to be what I am, but I really didn't want to be a shaman because I didn't, he didn't tell me I was going to be a shaman. He was just teaching me things. I wanted to be a cop. So eventually when I got older, I became a cop, and I really started my journey then.
Well, you got the best of both worlds, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
In that respect.
Yeah, well, well, not only that, Marla, I'm also part Irish.
Right.
So I had the Celtic side of the family, and he would take me over to see the Irish side of the family. Well, on my dad's side of the family, we had black hair and hazel eyes, or dark brown eyes, or dark black eyes. And when he would take me to see my grandmother's side of the family, they had red hair and green eyes. So, I kept looking at him and looking at, and I'd ask him, I said, Dad, what's going on? He said, son, this is your Irish side. And the Irish side was, how the Irish are. They're really bubbly, and, they know how to party. So I had the Native American side, and I had my Irish side. So I had the best of both worlds, and I had the Celtic side of the family.
Yeah. Well, that kind of, in Celtic religion, is similar to shamanism, certain things, and so you got it from both sides, actually.
Well, it was actually my aunts who, were on the Irish side. They were special, too. I mean, they had abilities, too, and they would look at me, and they would take me over to one side, you okay? And they said, we kind of got a feel, something's going on with you. And I would tell them what was going on. I said, well, sit down and tell us about it, and we'll tell you a few things. And they would actually tell me the Celtic side of spiritualism. So I had both sides going on.
And they're very similar in many instances. So, yeah, I mean, you really got a good education, brought up in both those things. And
yeah, but as a teenager, I kept it to myself. I know I could see and hear things, and I'd walk, and I'd be in school, and I would see dead people walking around, and I just go on, and I didn't pay any attention to it. So that went on until I got over 21. And then, I decided I wanted to go in law enforcement, And so I went and did my law enforcement training, and I would go out on patrol and stuff like that, and I would have adventures like that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and sorry, go ahead.
And that's when I really got into, when I found out about shamans.
Okay. Well, I also remember from one of your previous visits that you talked about it's kind of being a police officer, and with your talents, or your gifts rather, you saw things on patrol that you weren't looking for. Some supernatural, paranormal stuff going on too, because you had the gift. And so it kind of melded together, didn't it?
Yeah, well, when I became a peace officer, I was a state peace officer, and I was assigned to different areas of Kentucky, and this one particular time that, assignment I had was with the Fairgrounds State Police. So beside the Fairgrounds is a Native American burial, used to be, but they moved it since then. But used to be a Native American burial grounds, and I would go in there. But when I had my night shift from midnight to 8 a.m., I'd go sit in the burial grounds and just park there, and just watch things go on. And that time, I met my shaman named Singing Fox, who told me that I was going to be a shaman. So at the time, I didn't want to be. I wanted to be a police officer, but he was very strongly said, no, you're not. It's time to go on. So he kept after me because I was assigned there for a long time, and he would come back and forth at nighttime to see me, and I never did tell anybody about it, especially I didn't tell the hierarchies of the police force that what I was doing. So it was Singing Fox that got me on the path of a shaman.
Well, I may have gotten this wrong, but Singing Fox was not flesh and blood. He came to you in spirit, right? Well,
I was sitting in my car one night. It was raining. It was kind of a misty rain. And I'm looking out my car window, and I see this figure coming up, start walking towards my car. Well, I hit my lights, my bright lights, and got out of the car and told him, to halt. And he kept on coming. And I said, I'll put my hand on my gun. I said, halt. Don't come any closer. And he stopped, and he smiled at me. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, I belong here. And I said, let me see some identification. He started laughing at me. And I said, let me see some identification. He says, my name is Singing Fox. And he says, I belong here. And then when he looked at me up and down, like he was judging me a little bit, and he says, you're Indian, are you not? I said, yes. He said, what's your name? And I told him my surname. He said, no, from this day forward, your name is Windwalker, he who walks with the spirits. And when he did that, he told me that, he kind of faded out. So I knew what I had been.
Yeah, see, one thing led to another in a good way.
Yeah.
But, there's a lot of people that start early and see things. And as you said a little while ago, you went missing as a kid for 4 hours. And so obviously that was an extraterrestrial thing. So you've got more stories, and it's going to be really interesting, and it's going to be a really fast-moving hour. But I want people in the chat room to know that they're welcome to ask you any questions or share any comments that they may have. So, yeah. All right. So tell me a story.
Well, being told I was a shaman, I was still a police officer, and I just, I was kind of conflicted about what to do, but Singing Fox came a lot to see me at nighttime, and he would show me things and tell me things, and finally it got so bad that I just went on ahead and quit the police force and decided to go into the private sector. So when I did that, I had a lot of time to kind of get my bearings and, kind of see what being a shaman is all about. So I had to have more training. I knew I did. So I would seek out other people that were shamans, that were real shamans. Now, I'm going to tell you, Marla, there's a lot of fakes out there.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of kooks. And I lucked out I guess I was guided, to the right people. But this one particular time, I was guided to a shaman, and she was kind of serious. When I first knocked on her door and she opened up the door, and there was this lady standing there. She was in her 60s. She had long gray hair, really deep blue, green eyes type. It changed from green to blue. Right in front of you. So I had this feeling I was on the right track because I could feel, the energy coming off of her. And she smiled at me, says, "Come in." And I walked in, and she looked me up and down. She said, "Sit on the couch." I sat on the couch. She says, "I'll be right back." So she walked out of the room. She came back, and she handed me a watch, and she handed me a picture of a guy. And she says, "Tell me, what do you feel off these?" So I felt the watch, and I looked at the guy, and a story started in my head, and I started telling her the feeling I felt off the picture. The guy was kind of sad, and the guy didn't feel right. I said, "I think he's sick." And there was this really heavy feeling coming off the watch, and I told her about it. She looked me up and down and said, "That man in that picture was a friend of mine, and that was his watch, and he died of cancer." And she smiled at me and took him back and went out of the room. And she says, "I'm going to tell you, I'm going to start teaching you, and I want you to be very, very, watch what I do. Don't, watch everything I do and do what I tell you to do." And this was a female shaman now. And she taught me how to do overshadowing, and she taught me how to do scrying, and she taught me how to do, manifestation, all of it, as a beginning. So she said, when I teach you these things, this is to go for the good. Do not ever, use this, what I'm showing you, against people.
Mm-hmm.
You use it for protection, but do not use it against people. Well, when she told me to use it for protection, I did not realize when you're using it for protection, it was also doing it to defend yourself against the negativity and the darkness of the world. I didn't know that. So she just, her name was Rose, and this went on for about 6 months. And in that time, I got married, and I took my wife over to meet Rose, and she looked her up and down, and she approved, and she really, liked Shaman right off. And it was that time that Shaman started, we were kind of like Ed and Lorraine Warren back then, and I would go out on cases, and she would go with me. So one particular case she went out with me with. I started getting involved in paranormal cases, and teams would contact me to go with them because they would run up against some spiritual stuff, and they didn't know how to handle it. And my reputation as shaman was out there by then, and they would come and actually pick me up, pick Shaman up too, and they wouldn't tell me where we were going. They would pick us up and take us to a site, and it would be a house or a piece of property or whatever, and they would, tell us what you feel. So this one particular time, this team come and pick us up, and they took us to this house, and Shaman and I got out of the car, and we were walking up the driveway, and I noticed there was nothing growing on property, around the house. There was no grass. It was like dirt. There were no flowers. Everything looked dingy and dark. And I told Shaman, I said, we got something really nasty we're getting ready to get into. And she looked at me, and we walked, we pecked on the door, and the people took us into the house, the paranormal team, and, there was about there was 6 kids in the house, plus the mom and dad. And we walked in the house, and automatically I could feel that we walked into a negative, really negative situation. It was demonic, okay? Because I knew what we were walking into when I seen the property. And I also looked next door, and the property next door didn't have anything growing either. The house was empty. And your basic creepy-looking haunted house-looking thing next door, and there was nothing growing there, and there was dirt. I mean, but you could look across the street, and it was really pretty and all full of greenery, and the trees were blooming, and these 2 houses were dead. I call it dead land. So I knew what we were going to run into. So we walked in the house, and you can feel the energy. It was just like you're walking. If you're trying to walk in water, if you're underwater and you're trying to walk, like underneath in a swimming pool or something like that, the density of it, trying to push through, that's what it feels like. And the air was smelt really rancid, and Shaman looked at me. I said, and she shook her head. Yes, what we were getting into. And I always take my medicine bag with me when I go anywhere. So I have my goodies in there, my sage and holy water and all that kind of good stuff. So we're walking in, I'm looking around, and the kids are, kind of standing like at attention, like they were afraid to move. And the mother and father were sitting there, and I looked over at the team that I went in with, and I pulled the leader over to one side. I said, this is a demonic case, isn't it? And he said, I really didn't know what we ran into. We got some good EVPs, and we got some really nasty stuff, on the EVPs, and we caught some stuff on camera and stuff like that. But he said I didn't want to show you that, because he said I didn't want to give out too much information. So, I walked over to the family, and I walked up to the kids, and, they were more scared than oppressed, But the mother and the father were oppressed. They were really on the edge, So, I walked, I said, can I walk around your house? Oh, yeah, you can walk around. You want us to go with you? I said, no, we just want to walk around. So I had the paranormal investigators stay with them, and Shaman and I started our walk through the house, and we walked downstairs, and the place wasn't really all that kept. I mean, you can tell when you run into a situation like that you run into nasty stuff, and things aren't done, and food laid out, and it was rotten, and all that kind of stuff. And we knew, I said, oh man. And and it was upstairs. So we went upstairs, and we looked around upstairs, and we come down, and we went to the downstairs laundry room, and I could see that was a portal. And we walked up to it and said, "Shoo, this is a portal. Something's coming in and out of there." She said, "I can feel it too." So what I did, I put up a block right away on the portal, but there was something else going on. And I said, shoot, we got something else going on. So I could feel, I started a trail, I started to backtrack. I said, we missed something. So I looked around, and I said, let's go outside. There's something going on outside. So Shaman and I went outside, and we walked around the back of the house, and something was telling us to go next door. So we walked next door, and we could feel the same energy next door. Now, we had 2 different dwellings with the same energy coming from both of them. So we had an entity that was going back and forth between the houses. So I walked back inside the house with Shaman, and I called the paranormal investigators over to one side. I said, did you all go over and investigate the other house over? I said, no, we weren't, this is the house we were called in to investigate. I said, the house next door is in worse shape than this house is. I said, there's a portal that goes through the laundry room, and it passes through and goes into the other house next door. So you have an entity that's springing back and forth. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So I told Sheila, I said, first thing we got to do is block off the path of this thing. So I went on ahead and I did a block, and of course you know what that is. And I did the block, and I sealed off the portal. Then I went back and I went over to the family and I told them what was going on. Well, the kids, they were just scared, and I calmed them down. And all I did was do a blessing in the kids, and they were fine. But the mother and the father was so near, had been fed on by this entity that I had to do a clearing on both of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I did the clearing. It was a minor thing. If it had lasted any longer, and it did, I would have had a full blown possession going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to get them cleared, and I went through the house and I did the clearing on the house.
Mm-hmm.
Now I had to deal with next door. So I went outside with Shaman. We went next door, and being it was somebody else's property, we couldn't very well go inside. So we walked around, and I went on ahead and I put a protective circle around the house, around the outside, the perimeter. And I blocked that off. So what I actually did, when we went into the first house, the entity went through the portal, was over to the next door. I guess it was waiting till we left. Mm-hmm. But when we left, it stayed over in the other house. Okay, I got rid of it out of that house. And I told the people what was going on, and I told them not to go nowhere near that house. But the woman and the man said, well, we're going to move anyway as fast as we can. So within a few days, they had moved out of the house. So that house was empty, and the other house had the other entity trapped in it.
Wow. And did you sometimes, when you're doing stuff like that, the entity will show himself to you or try to, influence you. Did you have any contact with that entity?
I tell you what, when I started to block off the portal, I can hear this thing. It kind of had a kind of a scream to it, and Shaman, tell you, she heard it too, kind of a scream, and like somebody had taken a knife and stabbed it in the chest or something, and I knew then that I had forced it out of the house and back through the portal next door. But yeah, she and I heard it, and also, when we went back to talk to the paranormal investigators that night, and they took us outside after I did all that, they let me hear a couple of the EVPs, and it was kind of the same screen was on the EVPs. But they didn't let me know of anything about it. And I told them what I heard, and they kind of smiled at me and took me, and then showed me their evidence.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the right way to do it. You don't tell somebody coming in, because then they're going to, not work hard enough all the time to get to it. Yeah.
Well, what people don't realize, Marla, when you take on a case like that, now, when paranormal investigators come and get us, they all do it. I don't know. That's just the way they do things. If they get a practitioner, they'll put that practitioner in the back of a car and take them someplace and not tell them what they're taking them, and they want to know what you know when you walk in there. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times, like we might walk into a demonic situation and not know what it is. Not know what we're getting into. So, and people don't realize when practitioners go in and do something, it takes a lot out of them. Yeah. If I do something like that, it takes so much out of me. I've been knocked off my feet for a week before I can, sometimes I'll go home and I'll get in bed and I won't get up for 3 days.
Yeah, it's very draining. People don't always know that, but it truly is. All right, we're draining a little bit of time, so we are going to go to a break in about 30 seconds. In the meantime, I want to hear about some more ET things when we come back.
Okay.
And, more of your adventures, because, it's always interesting. People learn from hearing these things, and it's very enlightening, and it's very interesting. So everybody just sit tight, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.
Stirring the Cauldron will be right back, so don't go away.
If you end up with webbed feet,
Remember, you've been warned. Missed an episode of Stirring the Cauldron? Then be sure to check out marlabrooks.com and check out the archive. And while you're there, check out Marla's weekly Witches Oracle card reading. Explore the site to find many great resources, such as information on tarot, oracle readings, metaphysical consultations, and links to all of Marla's books. That's marlabrooks.com.
Red, where are you going?
I'm going back to the paranormal view, back where I belong.
Please, take me with you.
No, I'm through with everything here. I want to see if there's something left in life I haven't explored. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, Red, don't run to them. They talk about ghosts and hauntings, UFOs, and all kind of supernatural scary stuff.
You'll never understand, will you, Scarlet?
No!
Well, that's your misfortune.
Red, if you go, where shall I go? What shall I do?
Frankly, my dear... Line!
Oh, you gotta be kidding.
That's the Paranormal View with your host, Henry Foister, Jeffrey Gould, and Barbara Duncan. Every Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the Para X Radio Network.
Welcome back to Stirring the Cauldron. Once again, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, welcome back. And for those who might have come in a little bit late, my guest tonight is Shaman Willie Windwalker Gibson, and he's here sharing stories about his experiences with the paranormal and extraterrestrial as well. So let's get into another story, because time really fleed. Yeah, it went. Go ahead. Go for it, Willie.
Okay, I'm going to go back when I was 10 years old. After that experience with, I didn't know then was a UFO, but after that experience, I noticed at the base of my neck there was a knot about the size of a pea, and I didn't think too much of it. And that knot, which I didn't know was an implant, was there up until about 3 months ago. But through the years, I didn't know that was a way for the ETs to trace me, to track me. So all through my childhood and different times, I would have experiences. And usually it would be, when I would be out in the country visiting my aunts or someplace like that, away from the city as much as I could. So this one particular time, I was out at my aunt's house, and the next door neighbor, she would come over when I would be on my spring break, and I would go to my aunt's house, and I don't know, about this time I was around 12 years old, and she would come over, and we'd spend some time and play and all this kind of stuff. And my aunt lived in a trailer next to some woods, so we would go playing in the woods and everything like that. And it was safe and all that. And beyond the woods a little bit was a little clearing, like a little meadow, And this one particular time we were playing in the woods, and we went up to the meadow, and we seen this silver disc sitting in the meadow. It was about the size. It was, it was pretty huge, So, and her name was Denise, and she looked at me and said, "What's that?" And the minute she says, "What's that?" she fell to the ground, and I thought they'd killed her, but she was asleep. And I looked back at the silver disc, and by then there was these two little beings outside. They were blue-gray, big heads, big black eyes, and I wasn't, believe it or not, I wasn't scared. So they kind of motioned to me to come over to him, and I just went over there and went right into the ship, and that was the last thing I remember doing. And I woke up in the meadow laying beside Denise. So I woke up, and she was laying there, and I shook her, and she said, what's going on? I said, we fell asleep. Well, the disc was gone. So later on that night, I started thinking about it, and I started having I don't know what you would call flashbacks. And I remember going into that ship, and then I remember there was a person there, like a regular person. It was a tall, blonde guy, and he told me, he's in a white, kind of like a white silver jumpsuit type of thing, and he told me his name was Adam. He said, "Don't be afraid, Willie. You know me." And and it, how you would, in and out, flashes in and out, and that was the last thing I remember about that until later on as I was growing up. Well, I had met Shaman back in 1988, and I had told her, about, being able to see and hear things. And I come on out, and I told her, I said, I've been seeing flying saucers and space people, too. And she looked at me and kind of smiled. She said, I've been seeing, that happened to me when I was a kid. She said, I remember 3 ships, flying overhead, and she says, I remember this and I remember that. It was almost like we were meant to run into each other because we had the same type of experiences.
Yeah.
So all through my childhood, I'd have these different experiences. I liked space, movies like The Day the Earth Stood Still and Star Trek and all that, and Dad would watch it with me too. But at the time, I just figured I was I was a big fan of sci-fi, and so was he. But later on in the years, I kind of figured to myself, what if my dad was an abductee too? He just didn't tell anybody. So, I never did tell him that I was experiencing UFOs and things like that. So back in 1988, we're going to fast forward. Back in 1988, there was this UFO conference in Louisville, and Shaman and I went, and it was MUFON put it on, and we're sitting there, and we're in the audience, and I'm watching the presentation and all this kind of stuff, and and after the presentation was over with, we were kind of mingling around. I was talking to different people, that had different experiences, and we were talking about mine, and one of the people from MUFON, who was a big wig at MUFON, was a director, said, Willie, how would you like to be involved with MUFON? How would you like to be a counselor for MUFON and talk to people that's had experiences? So I said, that sounds pretty good. I don't mind doing that. She said, well, I'll send you some people. They'll contact you, and you can set up counseling sessions with them. And, sometimes they would come to the house, and sometimes I would have a big meeting at the Louisville Library, and I would have 30, 40 people there, and they would tell me about UFOs and their experiences and things, and they would show me pictures and show me scars on their body and stuff like that, and I did that like once a month. Well, this one particular meeting, a guy walks in. He was dressed in a really dark suit, had a crew cut, and he was carrying a briefcase, and he sat down with the group, and I had him introduce himself, and he told us who introduced himself, and he said, I got something I'd like to show you. I said, okay. He pulls out a file and shoves it over to me, and it had top secret on it. I opened up the file, and it had pictures of different aliens in there and different spaceships and different writing. He says, what do you think about this? And I seen that writing in there, and I had seen that writing before. Well, Shaman was sitting there beside me, and she would bring her little pocketbook or whatever. I said, Shaman, have you got those drawing in your pocketbook? She said, yeah, I got it. She pulled it out and put it beside what he brought. It matched. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
He said, where did you get this? And she said, I sat down and I start drawing things and I come up with this. He looked at that, and I mean, it was exact. And he grabbed his briefcase and put the top secret thing back in there, and he got up and he left. And one of the guys in the group, he says, he looked military to me, Willie. And I said, I got that feeling too. Well, after that happened, about a month later, Shaman and I, this was on a Sunday. We're driving down the road, it was about 9 o'clock in the morning, and this big black SUV pulls up beside us and runs us off the road, runs us off into a ditch. And I almost flipped the car. And she said, they tried to kill us. And I started thinking maybe it was the military, and then I got to thinking maybe it was a man in black type of situation. So I had that happen, and then I started getting phone calls and hang-ups. And then I started getting weird cars going up and down my street. And then I went to the mall one day and pulled into the mall, and I looked up and I could see guys in suits across the parking lot, and they dressed kind of the same way with glasses on and hats. I said, uh-oh, So I started being surveilled after I started that group, and I came and I told Shu, I said, we're getting hang-ups, we got run off the road. I think it's time we kind of cool it a little bit on the counseling. So I broke up the group, and I told Mufant, I'm going to back off a little bit because I was kind of getting a little bit of pressure from, the government.
Yeah, it's going to be a scary thing to do because, we're still talking now. I had several guests on my shows over the past few years, and they all said that there was going to be final disclosure to everybody in 2020. And so I think everybody was waiting, to hear from the government, yeah, there are, UFOs and extraterrestrials, but that hasn't happened yet. So I guess everybody's still kind of waiting on that. But
Marley, by disclosure, if you look at the media and you look at the internet, you see that sightings are getting more frequent. It's almost like they don't care anymore that you see the ships. I mean, you can see like you can see a bunch of them flying together. They don't care, and even in space, on the space station, it's nothing for them to look out and see them flying around. So it's almost like they don't really care anymore. What I do know, there are bases here on Earth under the water. They're in mountains. I have memories of being taken and waking up and being inside like a laboratory, but it wasn't on a ship. It looked like a cave, and I could see cylinders with what looked like humanoids in them. It was like a green liquid. And and I even seen like a railway, like a train type of situation that was going back and forth in the lab. So I think I was at one of these facilities, and I just I get bits and pieces of it. And the ones of us who have been taken, I think we've been given some knowledge that's going to be activated when the right time comes, so we can kind of help out with the information that we need to put out to people.
Yeah, because the full disclosure thing, I mean, somebody in chat just said that he thought that the government admitted the existence of UFOs, and I don't think they're so hush-hush about it as they used to be, but Full disclosure is kind of scary because some people are going to freak out if, the government comes out and says, well, we've known this for the last 40 years, but we just didn't say anything to you. So it should be kind of interesting if that full disclosure ever does come out and how it's going to be processed or accepted or even talked about. Because,
there is a federation. There is a federation of planets and different species that we know about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like when the movie "The Day the Earth Stood Still" came out in 1951. I think they released that for a reason. Not just for entertainment. I think they were giving us a little bit of information in that movie. If you watch it very, very closely, he talks about Federation of Planets and things like that. Well, it's really true. And they're talking, like NASA, we're going to go, to the moon and we're going to go to Mars. We've been there for years. It's a cover. There's base on the other side of the moon and there's people on Mars. We got craft that can be there in no time. The triangles, that's ours. Back engineered, all these different crafts, that's us. And, like the president says, well, I got a Space Force now. Well, you've had a Space Force ever since way back, even in Reagan's time. It's like I said, NASA's like a smoke screen. You send the astronauts up in the thing, and they float around for 6 months, and they come back down. I think, and this is my own personal thing, I think it's just an observation type of thing, platform that watches all these things. Just for intelligence type of thing. But we've been, there's things on the other side of the moon, bases over there, and even Mars. So, we've been going there for years, and you can get, there's people coming out now that's giving testimony, say, hey, I was assigned to this post on Mars for so many years. That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. Well, they said, I've had a lot of guests on that talk about Roswell and things like that, and they say that every U.S. president since was it Eisenhower? Because Roswell was in the 40s and then in the 50s. But they always say that President Kennedy knew about it, and one president after the other has always known about it. And so, I think we would be silly to think we're the only life in the universe. I think it's possible. But
it was said that Eisenhower met with them back in the early 50s and made a deal with them, for the technology. They can do pretty much what they wanted to on Earth, So, and he was missing several hours or maybe a day, and they don't know where he went to. So they're saying he went to the Air Force Base and met, I've talked to people that said that they'd actually landed, and he was standing there watching them land.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. They're just things that we're going to find out eventually, maybe, and things that we're not. But it's certainly not impossible, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, people ask me, so Willie, if you've been taking all these times, you and your wife, don't you do you get scared? What are we going to do about it? There was a time where we woke up and there was a green liquid in the bed, and it was. I took that and sent it off to University of Kentucky, and lo and behold, it got lost. You know what I'm saying? And Shaman has woken up with green fluid coming out of her nose. She woke up one morning and she had 2 black eyes. Her nose had been broken. And it looked like, and I had to keep her in the house for a couple of weeks until she started looking, okay again, because I didn't want people to think I beat my wife up.
Right.
You can't go out looking like that and say, well, I woke up one morning and I had 2 black eyes. Yeah, you just, and they look very hard at me. I said, no, you're not going out looking like that.
Yeah, it would be on you.
We've woke up, and one night, and the wall opened up, a portal had opened up, and the big white light, and these 2 creatures come walking out, looked at us, walked back in the wall closed up, and like it was normal.
I saw something like that on Doctor Who. And, it's funny because Doctor Who, science fiction, has some really interesting things that we hear about, not fictional, like about the reptilians and, whatever. Yeah. They take a lot of stuff and make stories out of it that you think, oh, I've heard about that, but not in fiction, so I don't know. There's just a lot of synchronicity there, I think, sometimes between the fiction and the nonfiction.
Yeah, and I've also had, a few people that I know that has mysteriously died, when they were getting ready to come forward of things they knew. I had a friend that had children taken from her, I don't know how many times, and she was getting ready to go to Washington when they had those Senate type of things, and she was going to go testify. Mm-hmm. And a couple of days before she's supposed to go testify, the house caught on fire, and she died in a fire.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're swearing that they're saying that wasn't an accident. So that's why I kind of backed off of things when I did, because it was starting to get a little dangerous for us too.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. Got a question from the chat room. How does an investigator decide when you're using, like, EVPs, for example, or other instruments? How do you distinguish a spirit or ghost from maybe an artificial intelligence or interference from, something spacey?
You mean between ETs and regular spirit?
Yeah.
I have, the things that I've ran into, they've always been spiritual. ET, I've never ran into an investigator that had a extraterrestrial case for me. I can tell you this, having the implant that I did have, when I would get like sick, mm-hmm. or I would get hurt or being in a hospital, they would show up there.
Mm-hmm.
One time I had a really serious operation, and I was laying in bed, and everything started to slow down. I could see people starting to walk in slow motion, and mm-hmm. then I flashed a light in the room, and they were there checking on me. Mm-hmm. And then there was a flash of light, and it would be gone. So about 3 months ago, the implant, I think my body, I got so old, up in age, that the implant wasn't working right. And where the implant was, it started growing. It went from like pea size, and I've had this thing since I was 10 years old, to about the size of, I would say, a golf ball. Maybe a little bit larger than that, and I started getting concerned about it. Mm-hmm. So I went to the emergency room, and they looked at it and said, well, we're gonna lance this and drain it. Well, when they opened it up, and the doctor said, ew, I've never seen this before. They started pulling this stuff out, and she said, I don't know what it was. It was all stringy, and there's I don't know. She said maybe a little gristle or something in there. She pulled it out and sewed me up. I think the implant somehow started rejecting my body after a certain. I'm 65 years old now. I've had this thing in me for over 50 years, so I think it was time for it to come out. And they took it out. They just thought it was just a regular, regular boil or whatever. But after that, I mean, it never came back or anything. There's a scar there where it used to be.
Yeah. Wow. Got a quick question. It's going to have to be a quick answer, but a chat room question. What are the aliens' intentions? Do they want to coexist or what? Why are they waiting to come forward? Because I assume they don't need our government's permission. What do you got an answer for that kind of?
From what I what's happened all these years to me, right now they're just watching and doing whatever they're doing to the people they abduct, and I think we're being programmed. There might be, no telling how many thousands of us, millions of us, are out there walking around with knowledge that when the right time comes, we're going to be activated. I don't think it's going to be a bad thing. You know, if they really wanted to come and take over, they can. I think it's more observation right now. And I can tell you also what I feel. I think they're protecting us too from other beings, from other planets.
Yeah. Well, we hear that some of them are benevolent, and so yeah, that's good. All right, we really have to get out of here. Next time you come on, Willie, we're gonna maybe have you do some animal totem readings, if you don't mind. We didn't get to that today, but we'll do that. And where can people find you if they want a private reading?
Look at they can get me at crystalchief55@AOL.com, and they can find me on Facebook, Willie Gibson.
Okay, easy enough. Well, thank you. I like stories, and these are good stories, and they're true stories, and that makes them even better. So thanks for joining me tonight.
Yeah, Marley, I tell the people, too, I've got 2 books out, The Shaman, Windwalker, and Soul Warriors. They're both on Amazon.com. They can get a lot of knowledge from those books, too.
Yes, especially I was kind of peeking a little bit at Soul Warriors, and yeah, that's a good book to get. All right. Everybody, thank you for listening in tonight, and we'll be back next week with a surprise guest. It's going to be a surprise for me, too, because I haven't booked her yet, or him. But anyway, take care, everybody. Stay safe. Blessed be, and merry meet again. Good night.
Circle be open, but unbroken. May the peace of the goddess be ever in your heart. Merry meet and merry part, and merry meet again. Merry meet again. Merry meet again.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Please join us again next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited.